Hello guys, this is your friend. We are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto became the ultimate shinobi under Kakashi, Guy, and Anko, part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start a new fanfic. Naruto was smart. Maybe he wasn't the type of smart that made him brilliant with numbers or words, but that didn't mean he wasn't. No. He was the type of smart when you're given a puzzle with missing pieces, he still completes it and knows what he's looking at. That's how Naruto was smart, and the reason why he knew he wasn't like everyone else. It had taken him nearly 5 years to finally understand that he was different than everyone. It took him that long to understand that no one else received the glares did, no one else was cursed at and thrown out of stores, no one else had their right to exist denied. It had puzzled him for a very long time. He knew that he wasn't like everyone else, but he didn't know why. He had a head, 2 arms, 2 legs, feet, hands, and etc. He looked like everyone else. Well, perhaps that wasn't true. He was the only one that he knew had blonde hair, yet his hair darkened onto a reddish blonde at the tips. He didn't know anyone else that had the same shade of cerulean blue eyes, but around his pupil his eyes darkened into an amethyst purple. But that didn't make sense. He had seen a man with gray hair that stood up and he wasn't treated any differently. Well, except for the women cursing at him because of some book he read. After Naruto ruled out that it was because of his appearance, he searched for the reason elsewhere. He looked up his name, trying to see if his family had done something in the past and he was being hated for their deeds. He found out that there was a clan called the Uzumakis, but they had been destroyed in the Second Shinobi War. What's more, the Uzumaki and their village been very close with Konoha, so that couldn't be it. That didn't mean he hadn't been excited to know that he once had family, there was even the chance there had been survivors. He looked in the village's ninja records of shinobi to see if any came to Konoha, secretly of course, and found the name of a woman named Kushina Uzumaki. Much to his sadness, she was deceased due to the Kyuubi attack 6 years ago. Naruto knew that the woman was likely his mother. The records had shown that she had been pregnant 5 years ago and he had been born at the time of her death. From her autopsy report, she seemed to have given birth to him, then joined her comrades fighting the Kyuubi. Naruto thought he had a really badass mom and cried over her passing. After his tears had dried, he looked for some information regarding his father, but he sadly found nothing. After ruling out that he wasn't hated because of something his clan had done wrong in the past, he was at a loss for a long time. He had nearly given up hope until one night he had snuck into the library to read. Reading was one of his favorite pastimes. Books never cursed at him, books never called him mean names. Books just wanted to be read, it didn't matter if it was by an orphan or by a king. He wasn't allowed into the library, the librarian always threw him out when she saw him. She would even throw away the books he had touched. Though, she didn't know that Naruto always rescued them from the trash. During his midnight reading, he stumbled upon a word that finally gave him the answer he had been looking for. A single word that ended his quest for an answer and changed the world for him forever. Jinchuriki. A human sacrifice, a vessel for one of the 9 Biju. A human weapon that would slaughter thousands when ordered. That's what he was. A weapon. A tool for his village to use at their convenience. What else could he be? He had been born on the same night that the Kyuubi had attacked. He found out that there was no known way of killing a Biju, they could only be sealed away. Unlike other Biju, the Kyuubi couldn't be sealed inside an object. It could only be sealed inside a person. That person was him. Naruto had been understandably distraught after learning this. Especially when he realized that his hero had sealed the Kyuubi inside of him. In truth, Naruto didn't hate the 4th Hokage. He understood that there had to be sacrifices in order to protect Konoha, he was just one of those sacrifices. Naruto didn't think that the 4th wanted to seal the Kyuubi inside of him, but he just didn't have another choice. Naruto had been depressing for days afterward. It was to be expected considering what he had just learned. However, there had been an edge of happiness in him. He finally understood. Now that he knew why everyone looked at him with those cruel and cold eyes, it was so much easier to bear. After he had left the library that night, he had hardened his resolve. He would show the village. He would show them that he was Naruto Uzumaki and not the stupid Kyuubi. The only way he knew how to show them that was to become a ninja. He hadn't really wanted to be a ninja, even though he was friends with the Hokage. He didn't like the fact that ninja lied and murdered. That scared him. He didn't want to hurt anyone. The thought of murdering someone was unthinkable to Naruto's young mind. However, if he wanted to be viewed as Naruto Uzumaki and not the Kyuubi, then he would have to swallow his fears. He would become a ninja, not just any ninja, but he would become the Hokage. The only problem was how to become strong enough to become the Hokage. The Hokage was the strongest ninja in the village, and from what he had read about Gigi, then he had a very long road ahead of him. He didn't know how to become strong. While he was eligible to enter the academy this year because of Gigi, Naruto knew that he would be sabotaged. While most shinobi never outright hated him, he knew that the majority didn't like him. He could only get a start in the library. It had the ninja basics available to civilians. Stuff like how to access your chakra, the basic 3, how to throw kunai and things like that. However, that wouldn't be enough. He couldn't become the Hokage with the henge. Naruto had begun to despair. If he didn't get anything above the basics, then his dream was over before it even had a chance to begin. The academy teachers wouldn't teach him anything and he couldn't get anything else in the library. That meant he was screwed. However, unknown to Naruto, he would soon meet someone that would solve his problem. Naruto raced home late at night. Judging by the moon Naruto guessed it was roughly midnight. The streets were practically deserted. The only people in sight were a few drunks and ninjas running on the rooftops. However, Naruto paid them no mind. He had just committed a major crime. He had stolen from the library. He broke in and took several books that all related to becoming a ninja. He wasn't exactly sure what he had grabbed. He had been too nervous that he was going to be caught to pay any mind to the titles. They were big though. One of them was nearly as big as his arm. He had them stuffed in his book bag that he held to his chest. He was so focused on making sure that not a single one was visible or that his bulging book bag looked suspicious that he wasn't looking where he was going. That was until he rounded a corner and collided face first into someone. Naruto was knocked backwards and he fell on his side, his backpack coming free of his grasp. Naruto hissed in pain as he pulled himself together, ignoring his scraped knee as he looked for his backpack as he stammered an apology. I'm sorry. I wasn't looking where I was going and I didn't see you. I'm sorry, he said as he looked down. From past experience, people were kinder when he bumped into them if they didn't recognize him. Naruto felt panic bubbling in his small chest as he looked around. He couldn't find his book bag. He looked all around him and it was like it suddenly vanished. Unless, Naruto dared to peek up and saw that his book bag was being held out to him. If that didn't surprise him enough, he knew the person. It was the masked guy that got yelled at a lot by girls. Naruto froze for a second before he reached out. "That's mine," he said weakly, knowing that now the man knew that it was his. He wouldn't let him have it. To Naruto's shock, the man smiled at him. Well, not exactly a smile, but an eye smile. "I know, here you are," he said kindly as he gave the bag a small shake. Naruto snatched it from the man's grasp and gave him a small glare, almost as if he dared him to try to take it back. Kakashi chuckled as he returned to his full height as he looked down at the small boy that would have been his little brother. This was Kakashi's first time having a conversation with him. However, it wasn't because Kakashi hated Naruto for what he contained. It was because Kakashi was a part of his Anbu guard. The Hokage had prohibited him from speaking to the boy, then he and the Shinobi Council had denied every attempt he made to adopt Naruto. He had nearly rained down hell on the village for that, but he was stopped thanks to the combined efforts of Guy and Asuma to calm him down. After the failed adoption attempts, he became Naruto's Anbu guard. If Kakashi couldn't protect Naruto in the light, then he would protect him from the shadows. Kakashi repressed a sigh as he took in Naruto's appearance. The boy was a little on the skinny side and his clothes were several sizes too big. However, Kakashi ignored that in favor of focusing on Naruto's bloodied knee. He nearly winced when he saw it. He felt terrible when he realized that he caused the wound. To his surprise, Naruto didn't even seem to register the knee. Children your age should be screaming their head off when they're hurt like that, he thought as he watched Naruto get up and begin to make his way back home. Naruto had already thanked the odd man. He had manners, of course, but Kakashi had been too lost in his thoughts to hear him. However, Kakashi said, a grin in his voice, I believe this belongs to the library, he said as he held up a book titled, Fuinjutsu for Beginners, How Not to Blow Yourself Up. By Jiraiya. Naruto froze as he slowly turned around. His stomach was in his sandals. He had been caught. When did the man take that out of his bag? What did he do now? I'm sorry, Naruto said in an upset voice as he slowly made his way back to Kakashi for whatever punishment awaited him. He looked down at his sandals as he held out the book bag filled with knowledge. Kakashi stifled a chuckle when he saw Naruto walking back like any other child would when caught red-handed. He took the backpack and opened it and saw that it was stuffed with ninja basic books. His only visible eye widened a fraction as when he saw that. Not even a week ago, Naruto was completely against being a ninja. What had changed? Quite the haul you have here. Any reason why a boy your age is stealing from the library at this time of night? He asked in his most stern parent voice. It was bad at best considering he had just turned 17 and his father had killed himself when he was 5, then Sensei died when he only knew him for a few years. So Kakashi wasn't exactly sure how to sound like a parent. If it were possible, Naruto's shoulders lowered further. I wanted to learn how to become a ninja, Naruto answered honestly. Kakashi already knew that, so he prompted Naruto to continue. Why do you want to be a ninja? He asked in a lazy tone. Despite his tone, Kakashi was rather curious. The boy had shut the Hokage down every time the old man brought up the subject of Shinobi. While Kakashi could see that the ability to breathe fire and command lightning appealed to the child, like it would to any other, Naruto saw past the glory. Naruto looked underneath. He saw how bloody and brutal the shinobi world was and wanted nothing to do with it. I want to become Hokage. Naruto all but shouted as his eyes shined with determination. He stared up at Kakashi as if he were daring him to ridicule his goal. His stare promised a bloody end if he did. Once again, to Naruto's surprise, the man seemed to bring up that feeling a lot with Naruto. The white-haired ninja chuckled, Hokage huh? That's a pretty big goal, Kakashi commented. Naruto paused for a second. The man hadn't made fun of him. Why didn't this man look at him with those cruel, cold eyes? What was different about this man? All these questions raced through Naruto's young mind, but he was snapped out of his pondering when he saw Kakashi was waiting for him to say something. Yeah, I guess. Naruto muttered. Aren't you a bit young to want to be a ninja? Kakashi asked, feeling like a hypocrite as he did so. He had become a genin at 5, the same age as Naruto right now. Hell, in 3 months from now would be the anniversary of his first kill. Naruto's eyes narrowed. I'm joining in the academy this year, he shot back. Slowly his initial nervousness began to fade and a brash attitude replacing it. Oh, if you're enrolling this year, then why did you steal these books? Kakashi asked, though he knew the answer. It seemed Naruto was able to foresee the problem with entering the academy as well. Naruto winced, realizing that he walked right into a trap, because people don't like me. They're going to mess with me, so I'ma become strong on my own, Naruto yelled. Kakashi sighed softly when he heard that, and before he even knew what he was doing, he patted Naruto on the head. No need for that, I can teach you if you want, he said. The words slipping out of his mouth before he even knew what they were. Naruto looked up at the man in complete shock, and Kakashi felt how he looked. Where did that come from? He silently asked himself. The words just came out, he hadn't thought about what he was saying until he had already said it. Kakashi could practically feel the shitstorm that was going to rage because of that one simple sentence. However, Kakashi didn't regret saying it. Those few words were how he truly felt. He wanted to teach Naruto, he wanted to help him to his goal unhindered by the idiots in the village. He wanted Naruto to look up to him, to see that he was there for him. Naruto looked up at Kakashi with wide eyes. Really? He asked in a guarded tone. The offer had come completely out of nowhere, and Naruto was more than a little suspicious of it. For all he knew, it was some mean trick. However, Naruto hoped the man's offer was genuine. The man hadn't looked at him with that mean stare, no, he looked at him like the opposite. The man's eye was warm, like he liked him. Like he saw Naruto for Naruto and not what he contained. Like he wasn't a weapon for the village. The man gave him another eye smile. You bet, he said in a chipper tone as he gave Naruto's head another rub. I'll just have to tell the Hokage, but that'll be simple enough. He lied smoothly. Naruto beamed with happiness, a smile on his face so bright Kakashi nearly had to look away. Thank you, mister. He said with a full-blown smile. Kakashi smiled underneath his mask. The name's Hatake Kakashi, he said as he gave Naruto back his book. Naruto flushed as he took it back and stuffed it in his backpack. My name's Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto introduced himself as he slung the backpack over his shoulder. Kakashi gave him another eye smile. Nice to meet you, Naruto, he said as he shook the young boy's hand. Absolutely not, Hiruzen Sarutobi said in a flat tone. He was the Hokage of the village and the strongest one in it. At one point in his earlier life, he had been one of the strongest in the world. He was the god of Shinobi, the man that knew and mastered every jutsu in the village that wasn't a clan technique. He had a SS rank in the bingo book when he was younger, but now he was an old man. He was still an S-ranked shinobi without a doubt, but he was approaching his 70s and was nowhere near as strong as he once was. Kakashi was unfazed by his request being denied. He had expected that from the beginning. Hokage-sama, Naruto wishes to become a shinobi. He can't go to the academy, they'll ruin him. On the other hand, am Anbu, and until recently I was a captain. I can teach Naruto and make him a force to be reckoned with, Kakashi responded calmly, but there was passion in his voice. That's the problem, Kakashi. You're Anbu, one of the best, Hiruzen said as he puffed on his pipe. The smell of tobacco filled the room, but Kakashi paid it no mind. After the Hokage lit his pipe, he continued, Kakashi, you are a major asset to this village. With the Kyuubi attack and my student's defection, we are severely weakened. Our position as the strongest village is nothing more than smoke and mirrors to keep others from invading. I cannot allow you to withdraw from Anbu at this time. We are already too weak as it is, and if you step down from Anbu, then we will be weakened even further, Hiruzen explained. If it had been a different time, Hiruzen would fully support the idea. He saw potential in Naruto and knew he would make a splendid shinobi. However, the timing was too poor. They couldn't lose another excellent shinobi at this time. It had actually been that reason why Hiruzen prohibited Kakashi from interacting with Naruto. He had been even against Kakashi becoming Naruto's tail, but had relented when he saw how passionate he was about it, how much hell he would raise if he was denied this as well. Kakashi nodded in understanding. He understood his village's situation and how big of a part he played in it. Kakashi steeled himself and took a calming breath. He was about to do something very, 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 very stupid. However, if it worked, then the payoff would be big enough that he could teach Naruto. He just hoped his horrible luck took a major turn for the better. Kakashi walked forward to the Hokage's desk. confusing the weathered man greatly, before he reached up to his headband and untied it. If that's the case, I, Hitaki Kakashi, Jonin and Anbu of Konoha's forces, hereby resign, he said in an aloof tone to mask the nervousness he felt. He placed his headband on the Hokage's desk and took a step back. There was a heavy silence. The only sound that could have been heard was the Anbu in the room taking a sharp intake of breath. The Hokage stared at Kakashi with a blank expression, but Kakashi could see the surprise, shock and lastly, anger in the old man's eyes. Kakashi briefly pondered that a few sentences seemed to change his life completely. Hiruzen looked up at Kakashi in shock. While Shinobi leaving the forces wasn't exactly uncommon, it was very dangerous for the higher-ranking ones. If you were a genin, it was as simple as handing in your headband. Genin weren't trusted with the secrets of the village, so they didn't know anything worth wiping their memories for. Chunin, on the other hand, depending on where they worked, had several memories sealed away. There was no permanent damage other than a few holes in their memory, but those could be filled with fake memories by the Yamanakas. Jonin was a completely different story. Jonin ranked ninja knew dozens of very dangerous secrets about the village, and if they were sealed away, then brain damage would be the least of their worries. It usually took a ninja years to reach the level of Jonin, so that was several years of experiences and missions that needed to be sealed away. When that happened, then years of rehabilitation were necessary to help the ninja cope with having half of their life missing, along with some brain damage that would occur during the sealing. However, Kakashi wasn't just a Jonin, he was Anbu. Hiruzen would have to double check, but he was sure that there has never been Anbu that withdrew from the Shinobi forces. If they wanted to retire, then they became a Jonin, but they never left the forces. While there were a few exceptions to this rule, like if a ninja went on maternity leave or they were forced to retire, then they were placed in the inactive list. They were still technically in the forces, they just didn't take missions. Hiruzen wasn't sure the exact result if Kakashi proceeded with withdrawing, but he was sure it would be something along the lines of him becoming a drooling wreck incapable of feeding himself. Slowly, the shock and surprise left Hiruzen's eyes, leaving only anger. You are playing a very dangerous game, Kakashi, Hiruzen said in a stern tone. Kakashi didn't respond. He was too busy worrying if he had made a mistake. If this huge gamble didn't play out how he hoped it did, then he had more or less just condemned himself to being mentally handicapped. This entire gamble rested on the hope that he was too valuable to the village to let that happen, and the Hokage would rather lose him for a year or two than lose him permanently. Hiruzen breathed in tobacco and let it out in the form of a deep sigh, before he picked up Kakashi's headband and threw it back at him. You can keep that, he said in a flat tone, but there are going to be several conditions if you want to teach Naruto. Kakashi nodded as he tied his headband back on its rightful place, silently thanking Lady Luck for listening to his pleas for once. Firstly, you are still going to take regular missions. Since you became Naruto's guard, you've only gone on 3 or 4 missions a month. That's a major drop from your average of 15 before. Now, your minimum is 5 missions a month. Kakashi nodded. That was doable. Especially if they were assassination missions, those only took a day to complete, 2 depending on the difficulty. Secondly, you will have Naruto become genin material within a year, Hiruzen said, thoroughly enjoying the look of shock on Kakashi's face. That's going to make things difficult, he thought. If he was going to be taking 5 missions a month, then he was going to be gone on average a week, possibly 2, out of the month. So in reality, he only had 6 months, give or take, to make Naruto genin material. Not only would he have to cram 4 years worth of the academy into a single year, but he was going to have to do it from scratch because Naruto didn't know jack about being a ninja. Failure to meet those conditions will result in you being discharged from the Shinobi forces and your memories will be sealed accordingly. In addition, all memories of Naruto will be sealed away, Hiruzen in a cold tone. If Kakashi wanted to play this game, then he was going to make sure that he did it right. He wasn't going to let Kakashi half-ass this like he did just about everything else. Kakashi's eye narrowed, but he nodded. Understood, Hokage-sama, he said with conviction in his tone. He would never let that happen. Hiruzen puffed his pipe before he decided to toss Kakashi a bone. If all of the requirements are met, then Naruto will be named your apprentice and I'll allow you to retire from Anbu. He could allow that. If, no, when, Kakashi made Naruto a genin in a year, Naruto would need a capable sensei to utilize his potential to the fullest. Kakashi was the best man for that job considering his brotherly bond with Naruto and being a prodigy himself. However, there was another reason Hiruzen needed Naruto to become a ninja as soon as possible. It was because he was a Jinchuriki. He needed Naruto to become a message to the other villages. Not only do we have the strongest Biju, but its container is also a prodigy. That's what he needed Naruto to represent if Konoha wanted to keep its seat as the strongest village. To keep other villages away so they won't prey on them in their weakened state. Kakashi's eye widened in surprise before he bowed. Thank you, Hokage-sama. If that's all, then you're dismissed. Naruto was practically bouncing with excitement. He had been woken up at 6 o'clock, something that confused him because he always woke up around 8, and saw a note telling him to be at training ground 7 in 30 minutes. At first he had been freaked out that his new sensei had broken into his apartment to leave a note and reset his alarm clock, but he brushed away those concerns because he found out that Kakashi was strong. Naruto had placed traps around his apartment in case someone ever tried to break in. It happened once before a few months ago. He wasn't home, but some of the villagers had trashed his apartment. They drew on the walls, broke his stuff and tried to burn it down, but the fire never caught. Naruto had cried for hours when he came home, but now he accepted the changes to his home. He placed posters over the mean words written on his walls, he replaced his carpet, something he was proud of, and used some money that Gigi gave him to buy new plates, chairs and stuff like that. Anyway, after the event, Naruto had booby-trapped his apartment to prevent others from entering without his permission. None of the traps were deadly, of course. They aimed to humiliate the intruders to the point vandalizing his home simply wasn't worth it. When Naruto saw that Kakashi-sensei had managed to not only break in, but he did so without setting off a single trap. If he could manage that, then Naruto could only imagine how strong his new teacher was. Naruto raced to training ground 7, he had to ask directions from a ninja with a scar across his nose to get there, but he arrived 10 minutes early. He was excited to see that his sensei was standing in the field with his back to him. However, instead of running into the field like he had intended mere moments ago, Naruto felt a wave of nervousness wash over him. What if this was a trick? What if it was a trap? These things had happened before, people tricking him by pretending to be his friend so they could hurt him. They didn't happen anymore because he knew better, but he had been so excited that Kakashi was nice that he hadn't considered the possibility. Naruto slowed to a stop as he pondered if he trusted Kakashi. The man seemed nice, he seemed like Kakashi liked him like Gigi did. However, Naruto knew that appearances were deceiving. People lied all the time and lying was a part of being a shinobi. If Kakashi was as strong as he thought he was, then didn't that make him a good liar? While Naruto considered himself a good judge of character, he had to become one when he was treated how he was. He didn't know if his ability to judge people surpassed Kakashi's ability to lie. Naruto stood still for nearly a minute, filled with doubt and indecision, before he took a step forward. He had faith in his ability, and if Kakashi did turn out to be a bad guy, that Naruto had faith in his ability to run away. Kakashi grinned beneath his mask and he continued to fake his obliviousness to Naruto's presence. He was testing how much Naruto trusted him and his instincts. He did rather well. He would have scolded the boy had he just run up to him without a second thought. However, Naruto debated if he trusted him since he only met him a handful of hours ago and decided to put faith in his abilities. Naruto didn't know it, but he already had the mindset of a shinobi. Kakashi thought that was both a good thing and a very sad thing. Kakashi-sensei, Naruto greeted loudly as he entered the clearing. Kakashi turned around and pretended that he hadn't noticed Naruto. "Ah, there you are. You're early," he commented as he gave the boy a disarming eye smile. Normally, he himself would be several hours late, but he really couldn't afford to waste time. So he had went to the Kia Memorial a few hours earlier. Naruto grinned at the silver-haired man as he subtly examined his surroundings. He relaxed when he saw that he and Kakashi were alone. Kakashi patted Naruto's head as he silently praised Naruto for taking in his surroundings. It made his job of turning Naruto into a genin in a single year so much easier since he already had a shinobi mindset. "So, for us to get started, I need to know if you actually know anything about being a ninja." "Ninjas kill and steal stuff," Naruto answered instantly, causing Kakashi to blanch. While the answer was most certainly true, it kinda hurt knowing Naruto didn't have a high opinion of him because of his job. "Well, that's right, but I was asking for stuff like if you've accessed your chakra or if you know how to throw a kunai," Kakashi stated, causing Naruto to, "Oh." Naruto shook his head. "I don't know how to do any of that stuff, that's why I stole the books," he answered, feeling slightly guilty when he said the word stole. Kakashi hummed in thought. While he hadn't expected any different, it was a little disheartening to see how long a road he had. Then again, he got to teach Naruto from the ground up. If he was a quick learner, then that would save time. "Then we should start with unlocking your chakra," he said as he began to tell Naruto how to do so. "Look deep within yourself and try to find a warm feeling in your stomach. When you find it, jump into it," Kakashi instructed. While the wording was rather vague, it had been the same instruction he was given when he unlocked his chakra. Naruto nodded and did what he was told. He looked inside of himself as he cleared his mind of any other thought other than finding and unleashing his chakra. It took several minutes, but he found the warm sensation in his stomach. He mentally plunged himself into the feeling and he felt a reaction all over his body. It was like his entire body had fallen asleep and it awoke, bringing a prickly feeling all over. However, it didn't feel bad. Naruto felt stronger, more alive than he had ever felt before. Kakashi rose an eyebrow. He was impressed. Not many unlocked their chakra on their first try. Very impressive. Now take this and channel that feeling into it. This will tell me roughly how much chakra you have, he said as he gave Naruto a small piece of white paper. It was similar to chakra paper, but instead of telling you what chakra nature you had, it told you how large your reserves were. It would turn blue in the presence of chakra, so the more blue you turned the paper, the more chakra you had. Naruto nodded as he accepted the paper and began focusing his chakra into it. He was surprised when he felt a sharp drain but ignored it and focused more chakra. Several seconds later he was done and he showed the results. Nearly half of the slip of paper had tuned into a dark blue, meaning that Naruto roughly had low Jonin to high Chunin chakra reserves. No wonder he accessed his chakra so easily. It would be hard for him not to, Kakashi thought as he gave Naruto a pat on the head and explained what the results meant. While having large reserves was never a bad thing in the shinobi world, it did mean Naruto was going to have a major problem with chakra control. With his reserves so large, likely because of the Kyuubi, it meant that they were going to have to prioritize chakra control for the time being. If they didn't, then it would be unlikely that Naruto would ever be able to do the clone jutsu. That thought made Kakashi realize something. What about the shadow clone jutsu? He wondered to himself. Apparently Naruto had the reserves for it and it would most certainly speed up his learning process. Kakashi gave Naruto a thoughtful look. No, not now. I'm not going to teach him an A-ranked jutsu on the same day he unlocked his chakra. I'll give it a few weeks and decide from there, the masked ninja decided. Not only were there risks, but he didn't want Naruto to become used to the easy way of training. If Naruto became used to using shadow clones from the beginning, then it would only hurt him in the long run. So I have a bunch of chakra. Naruto half asked and half exclaimed. He was excited. Since he unlocked his chakra, he had a lot more energy than he usually did. Kakashi nodded. Yep, a lot more than just about every other kid your age, he commented before saying, now, that is both a good and a bad thing, he said, causing Naruto's cheering to cease. How is it a bad thing? Because that means you're going to have to work on chakra control a whole lot. It's really important because if you don't have good control then you're going to waste chakra whenever you use a jutsu, Kakashi explained before he handed Naruto a kunai. Naruto looked down at the sharp piece of metal in confusion. What do I do with this? He asked his sensei, who gave him an eye smile. You climb trees with it. They spent much of the day like that, Naruto practicing his chakra control by climbing trees without his hands, Kakashi offering tips and encouragements when the 5-year-old became frustrated. Kakashi didn't show it, but he was very impressed with the progress Naruto had been making. Not only did he unlock his chakra, but he was only a few feet away from reaching the first branch. He was still a good while away from mastering the art of tree walking, but he made great progress. After Naruto went home, looking worse for wear but with a smile on his face, Kakashi decided to treat himself to some sweet literature and maybe a cup of tea. Well, that had been his plan until his self-proclaimed rival saw him. Hello Kakashi. How is my most youthful rival doing this most beautiful evening? Guy said, doing his best to sound, well, youthful. Kakashi considered pretending that he hadn't heard his longtime friend just to rile him up, but he was in a good mood. Oh hey Guy, I'm doing rather well actually, Kakashi said as he flipped the page to his little book. Guy's eyes widened. Kakashi was never in a good mood. He was always either in a meh or fine mood. Something must have happened for his eternal rival to be in an exceptional mood. What happened? Guy asked as he fell in step with Kakashi. I'm training Naruto, he said simply and chuckled when he saw Guy's surprised and worried look. With the Hokage's permission of course, he added. Guy stopped moving for several seconds, even though Kakashi kept on moving, before he yelled at the top of his lungs, how youthful of the Hokage-sama. He yelled as tears ran down his cheeks. Guy ignored the crazy looks he got from the civilians and caught up to Kakashi, but why now? He would only let you be Naruto-kun's guard before, Guy asked in confusion. I threatened to resign, was all Kakashi said as he gave his rival an eye smile. He nearly laughed when he saw Guy's jaw drop in shock, and before he even had to ask, Kakashi quickly explained the situation to him. Guy didn't interrupt once during Kakashi's explanation, a rare occurrence for him. Once Kakashi finished, he nodded in understanding. So you have to make young Naruto-kun eligible to take the Genin exam in a single year, he said in a serious tone. That was no easy task. There was a reason that the academy was a 4-year program. Kakashi nodded. Yep, and I have to do it while doing 5 missions a month, Kakashi said with a hint of a sigh. It certainly would be a challenge, but Kakashi was sure that he could complete it. Suddenly Guy gave him his signature nice guy pose, his teeth even sparkled in the dying sun's light. How about I help you train young Naruto-kun when you're off youthfully helping out the village? He said in a youthful tone. Kakashi seemed to think about the offer for a brief few seconds. Could he do that? He wondered. The Hokage never said anything about him not getting help to train Naruto, so it technically wasn't against the rules. It would be a serious help too. He didn't know if he could trust Naruto to keep up his own training yet. It would also mean that he wouldn't have to worry as much about Naruto's taijutsu since Konoha's #1 taijutsu expert was teaching him. Kakashi gave Guy an eye smile. That would be a help, he said, and Guy began to shout about the youthfulness of gaining a student. Naruto crawled into bed, his entire body ached, but he was glad for the weariness. It meant that he was getting stronger already. Not only was he getting stronger, but he had learned to walk up freaking walls. How cool was that? He didn't even know something like that existed or could be done with chakra. He had asked Kakashi about what else chakra could do, and he found out that after he mastered tree walking, then he would learn how to walk on water. What could possibly be cooler than that? Naruto grinned as he stared up at his ceiling. He had been a little cautious around Kakashi at first, but now Naruto could honestly say that the masked ninja was now his second favorite person, Gigi being number one of course. The man seemed to genuinely care about him and his goal, and Naruto didn't want to let him down. That was the reason he forced himself up and practiced tree walking on his walls. Kakashi yawned as he walked through the village. He looked worse for wear. His clothing was ripped and torn in half a dozen places, his hair had been singed by a stray fire jutsu, he walked with a small limp and blood was beginning to leak through the rough patch he had placed on his arm. He ignored the frightened and confused looks that he got from the villagers and the puzzled ones he received from Shinobi. He had just returned from his 7th mission this month. He had been reluctant because it was a week-long mission, but after he read the details he had packed without a second thought. Long story short, Kakashi rescued a princess and broke the backbone of the military that was attempting a coup in the country. So, in the end, it was worth being away for a week, but he did have a few concerns. Counting that mission, he was gone for nearly 3 weeks this month. He only got a few assassination missions and the rest lasted a few days each. He had left Naruto with Guy. While he wasn't concerned that Guy wasn't keeping up with Naruto's training, the green-clad ninja was a training nut himself, so that wouldn't happen. No, he had other concerns, far bigger concerns. Concerns big enough that he was heading straight for training ground 7 instead of the hospital, like he needed to. What was his concerns, you might ask? What kind of influence Guy would have on Naruto's impressionable young mind? Kakashi shook the thought of a green spandex-wearing 5-year-old Naruto out of his mind as he picked up his speed. He wouldn't let that happen. Things were bad enough with one guy. If he managed to make a clone, then the world would surely end. Kakashi had nearly arrived at the usual training grounds a few minutes later. He was still maintaining his brisk walk. He couldn't go faster because of his leg, but he heard something that made his heart drop. Youth. A deep voice yelled out the word into the forest. The word seemed to reverberate throughout the forest. However, that wasn't what frightened Kakashi so. That wasn't what caused anxiety and fear to crash over him. What caused it was when the forest had finally become silent again, when the word youth finally left the woods, he heard it. Youth, yelled a significantly higher-pitched voice. It wasn't high-pitched enough to be a woman's voice, no. The voice belonged to a child. Not on your life, Guy. Kakashi mentally swore as he ignored the pain in his leg and ran towards the clearing. He wouldn't let it happen. He wouldn't let Guy corrupt Sensei's son. He wouldn't let Guy corrupt his little brother. More body, Naruto-kun. To truly sound youthful, you must use your entire body. Like this. Youth. There was a small pause. Kakashi could practically see Naruto trying to copy Guy. Kakashi emerged from the forest and skidded to a halt, dust flying around him as he eyed the two in the clearing. Guy was looking at him with a wide-eyed and what could only be described as guilty expression. Naruto was looking at him with a similar expression, having been cut off in the middle of his best try at sounding youthful. After a few seconds passed, his surprised look dropped and a smile replaced it. Kakashi ni! Naruto yelled in excitement before he quickly crossed the clearing and jumped at the masked ninja. Kakashi smiled underneath his mask. He hadn't told Naruto of his would-be relationship with him. It had been something that Naruto himself decided to call him, and Kakashi thought it was one of the best things that had ever happened to him. He could finally look Sensei in the eyes when he reached the afterlife and tell him that Naruto was his little brother. He could finally say that he had a real family. Hey there, Naruto, how's training been? Kakashi asked as he gave the boy a smile. The boy grinned up at him. I did really good. I learned a new kicking technique today and a bunch more stuff since you're hurt. Naruto started in an excited tone, eager to tell his big brother his progress, but stopped when he saw the blood leaking through Kakashi's bandages. Kakashi rubbed the back of his head bashfully. Yeah, I'm a bit more roughed up than normal, he admitted as he allowed Naruto to sit him down. Naruto took out a scroll from his pocket and unfurled it. Seals covered the parchment, Fuinjutsu being a favorite of Naruto's. He decided to take up the art due to his mother and his clan. His clan had been known for their sealing prowess and his mother had been a renowned master at Fuinjutsu. He wanted to honor his mother by becoming a Fuinjutsu master as well. Unlike most shinobi skills, Fuinjutsu wasn't measured by being a genin level or a jonin level. How good you were was judged by what rank you were on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being a master. Naruto was currently hovering just above level 2. He only knew how to make storage scrolls, the most basic of seals, and knew a few theories for a few more. Neither Kakashi nor Guy knew that was the reason behind Naruto's passion behind the art. Guy chalked it up to Naruto's spirit of youth and Kakashi thought Naruto was drawn to it due to genetics. Naruto unsealed band-aids from the scroll and immediately began placing them on Kakashi's wound. He didn't need them since he healed fast, something he had previously thought was because of the bandages. He had heard a parent telling his child that band-aids made a scratch heal faster and he believed it. Now he knew that he healed fast because of either his Uzumaki genetics, a clan known for their longevity, or the Kyuubi sealed inside of him. Perhaps it was both, but the point was Kakashi needed the band-aids more than he. Kakashi glared at Guy as Naruto began placing shrunken covered band-aids on his arm, his gaze telling him he knew exactly what Guy was trying to do. Guy did the unyouthful thing and averted Kakashi's gaze before changing the subject before Kakashi could start it. Naruto-kun had made significant progress in the past 8 months. He commented with passion. It had been nearly a year since Guy and Kakashi began training Naruto had he made nothing short of astounding progress in that time. Naruto just seemed to absorb any knowledge they gave him like a sponge and was eager for more. Despite being only 5 he was high genin level in taijutsu. That was due to Guy's influence, the most Kakashi would allow. Naruto would constantly push himself to improve his taijutsu since it was Guy's specialty. While Naruto didn't call Guy his older brother, the eccentric ninja took the place of third in Naruto's favorite people. Not only did Guy not look at him coldly but he also encouraged him to improve. So, Naruto promised himself that he wouldn't disappoint Guy. He was also solid genin physically as well. He had adopted Guy's habit of constantly adding consequences if he failed to do something. He had even started joining Guy whenever the green-clad ninja lost one of his challenges. So his speed was roughly mid-genin and his physical strength was low genin. Naruto had begged for weights to improve that but both Kakashi and Guy shot him down because they didn't want to stunt his growth. Perhaps they would give him a resistance seal after he became a genin but not now. Naruto's genjutsu was at a halt. Due to his strict training and his additional training that he did, Naruto's reserves were growing at an alarming rate. He did keep up with his chakra control training, but he wasn't making any real progress until recently. He had mastered tree walking in a few weeks, something that surprised his senseis, they were positive it would take months. He had also mastered water walking as well. Naruto was now trying to find ways to make the exercise more difficult. He did it in a number of ways. He would carry weights as he water walked, have Kakashi and Guy spar him or throw blunt kunai. While he still couldn't stick a leaf to his forehead, he was slowly making he was there. While Naruto couldn't perform any genjutsu, he could break out of anything that was below a C rank and a few C ranked as well. While that did exceed the academy standards, Naruto's senseis both decided that Naruto would have to improve in the field. He didn't notice anything that wasn't glaring, that was the problem. The genjutsu that you don't see are the ones you need to worry about. Ninjutsu was where Naruto thrived. When he found out that Kakashi knew 1,000 jutsu, he threw himself in the art. He could make a solid henge, recreating a B-ranked infiltration jutsu, and do the kawarimi perfectly. He couldn't do the clone jutsu but that was fine since Naruto knew the shadow clone jutsu. Kakashi decided to teach the jutsu to Naruto about 2 months ago. Kakashi would have waited longer but he decided to when he concluded that Naruto wasn't going to use the shadow clones as a crutch. Both Guy and Kakashi had been quite surprised at Naruto's, as Guy would say, youth. They trained Naruto ragged, not only out of necessity but because Naruto kept asking for more. Every time they thought they found Naruto's limit, the child simply got back up and asked for seconds. Both Guy and Kakashi were impressed with Naruto's tenacity, so they began to add more and more to Naruto's training in addition to using shadow clones. Naruto couldn't spam the clones, yet, but he could make a 23 and still continue with training for a full day. 20 was the max they allowed Naruto to make, since 23 would have bothered Kakashi, and he wasn't allowed to use the clones when they weren't supervising him. They didn't know how the memory backlash would affect Naruto's mind since he was so young. They had been reassured by medics that as long as Naruto kept the numbers small, he should be fine. However, Kakashi didn't know if he trusted the word of someone that potentially could have it out for his little brother. Naruto could also perform a few low-ranked wind jutsus and a fire jutsu. The fire jutsu wasn't anything special, it actually wasn't even made for battle. It was a nameless fire-starting jutsu, but Naruto had taken to calling it fire release, bonfire. His wind jutsu included wind release, wind hammer and wind release, great breakthrough. Wind hammer worked on the same idea of great breakthrough, a large, powerful, dense wall of wind hitting its target. The only real difference was that it was more focused. That, and instead of blowing your opponents away, it made them go splat. While the jutsu were technically C-ranked, the better Naruto got with them the higher rank they would be, but for now they were still C-ranked. Unlike Naruto's other skills, most of which were at Genin level, Naruto's stealth and infiltration skills were already at low Chunin level. It had been a major surprise for the Tajonin because when they told Naruto that they were playing hide and seek, to test his stealth, it took them nearly an hour to find Naruto. What more, on several occasions, he had lured them into false leads and pranked them. Both men had been surprised at that, but it made sense when they thought who was tutoring Naruto in stealth. Naruto had also taken up Kenjutsu as well, another way to honor his mother. However, he was still too small to use a full-sized katana, so they gave him a tanto until he grew. He was given a scroll that held instructions for the dancing whirlpool style. From what he understood, it was the Kenjutsu style that all Uzumakis used. It focused on the idea of using circular momentum and using your opponent's force against them. It was mainly a defensive style, but Naruto knew a sister style for offense existed. So, in short, Naruto was ready to take the Genin exam, but Kakashi was the one that was holding him back. Even though Kakashi was the one who got them started on this path, he wanted Naruto to stay as a child for as long as he could, even if it was just one more day. Kakashi knew what it was like to be a child thrust into the world of Shinobi. He knew it was unavoidable, but he would push it back as much as he could. Plus, it would give Naruto that much more time to prepare. Naruto grinned. "Yeah, I have," he said proudly. He worked really hard during the past months and he could feel himself getting stronger every day. Then he remembered something. "Guy-sensei was teaching me a really cool technique today," he said in excited tone, causing Guy to go rigid. Kakashi rose an eyebrow. "Oh, what was it?" Kakashi asked in a knowing tone as he sent Guy a glance. "It was really cool. He was teaching me about the springtime of youth. He even said I could get an outfit like his." Naruto exclaimed happily. Guy had been talking up his signature outfit the past month and promised Naruto that he could get an orange one. Kakashi gave the boy a pat on the head, a habit he had developed, as he stood up. "Well, that was very nice of him," he said in a sickeningly sweet tone. He looked down at Naruto. "I think you've trained enough for one day. Why don't you go find your Ne-chan?" Kakashi offered the boy. He didn't need to see what was about to happen. Naruto's eyes drew together in concern. "But you're hurt," he protested weakly as he glanced at Kakashi's band-aid covered arm. "Don't worry about me. Both me and Guy will be heading to the hospital after this." Naruto walked through the entrance to the torture and interrogation department. He didn't even need to sign in because he had become a bit of a regular in the past few months. Not because he was here to be tortured or even learn how to, he was here to visit his Ne-chan. Naruto walked through the thankfully silent halls. He figured that they must have been using a privacy seal, or maybe it was a muting seal. He'd make sure to ask Ne-chan. He walked past a few ninjas. Some gave him an odd look. After all, what was a 5-year-old doing in the T&I department? However, others, that knew Naruto, pointed him in the direction he needed to go. Naruto made sure to thank them. If he was going to be Hokage, then he wanted to make as many friends in the village as he could. He arrived at the lounge and opened the door. Ne-chan. Naruto asked into the room. He saw her in an instant. She was kinda hard to miss with her purple hair tied up so it looked like a pineapple in her revealing clothing. Anko looked over at the doorway and grinned like a loon when she saw Naruto. She had talked to Ibiki about a recent prisoner that had come in and her plans to break him, but stopped mid-sentence when she saw Naruto. Naru-chan. She called out as the boy ran at her and she swept him up in a hug. She even did a twirl. Ibiki looked at the display with a raised eyebrow. The two of them did that every time they saw each other since they met about 4 months ago. Flashback. Naruto was walking through the village in boredom. He had finished training for that day and was at a loss for what to do. He was going to train again when he got home, of course, but he wanted to do something other than training right now. It seemed that all he did was train and he wanted to do something different for a change. Naruto sighed as he stuffed his hands into his pockets. Unlike before, his clothes actually fit. Kakashi had brought him to a clothes shop and bought him a couple sets of clothes. He had even went as far as bring Naruto food. While Naruto never had trouble getting his hands on food, it was getting good quality food that was the problem. Vendors would give him the spoiled fruits and meats so Naruto couldn't reach a healthy weight because he was throwing out half of everything that he bought. He smiled softly as he felt the soft cotton and as he remembered how Kakashi had stood up for him to the mean vendors and store owners. While a lot of what happened went over his head, he understood that Kakashi was a badass and the vendors were afraid of him enough that they stopped mistreating him. However, his smile soon dropped when he looked up sharply when he heard a loud smack. "Get your hands off me, asshole!" A purple-haired kunoichi yelled as she stood over the man she had just smacked. The two were in middle of the street and everyone stopped to see what was going on. The man held his cheek as he spat on the ground. "What do you expect me to do when you're dressed like a whore?" The man shot back. However, his speech was so slurred it sounded more like, "Wa de expect ma da shenya, dressed like a whore." Naruto looked at the scene but quickly dismissed it from his mind. He saw disputes like this often since he was given his apartment in the red light district. However, as Naruto was walking away, intending to forget all about it, but stopped when he heard the whispers. The whispers that had followed him his entire life. "Look at her. Snake whore. Traitor. Disappear." Naruto froze mid-step as he looked around and he saw them. The stares. The cold and harsh stare. The look that denied you of your right to exist. The eyes that said you were nothing and were worth less. He hated that look. Naruto turned his eyes to the kunoichi. Was she a Jinchuriki like him? No, that couldn't be. The only Biju that attacked Konoha was the Kyuubi. Not only that, but the whispers were different. They didn't call her a demon or an abomination. The kunoichi seemed to take it in stride. Well, that how it looked to others. But Naruto saw the loneliness in her eyes. The isolation. Naruto felt rage boil in his small chest and before he even knew what he was doing he yelled, "Hey shitheads!" at the top of his lungs. Naruto wanted to blink in surprise but he was too angry to wonder where the outburst had come from. As everyone's gaze turned towards him, the kunoichis included, Naruto planted his feet and yelled to the heavens, "I'm the pariah of this village, got it? Not her. So if you want to look at someone like that then it's gonna be me." He screamed at the top of his lungs, hoping the whole village would hear him. He meant the words with the very essence of his soul. He wouldn't let anyone else experience that look. He wouldn't let anyone else experience the loneliness he had suffered his entire life. If anyone had to suffer like that, it would be him. He was used to it and he had found people that he cared about so he could bear it. He could bear this village's hate and anger so no one else would have to. Everyone looked at him in surprise before they quickly sneered and began to disperse. They could handle being in the snake whores and demon brats presence separately, but together was unbearable. As they dispersed, Naruto yelled at them to spread the word, telling them that Naruto Uzumaki was the only pariah of the village hidden in the leaves. If you're going to be something, might as well be proud of it. As the crowd began to disperse, Anko looked at Naruto with shock still written all over her face. No once has anyone ever stood up for her like that. She had been treated like trash since she stepped foot in this village again because of her sensei. The monster had abandoned her, telling her she wasn't worth having around anymore, before he placed his curse mark on her. She was found at one of his bases without any memories of the 3 years she had spent with her sensei. He said they were on a training trip, but turns out he had left the village and brought unknowing her with him. After being brought back and cleared for not knowing anything, she had been released into the village. She had treated poorly to say the least. People whispering her name in distaste, calling her the snake whore. However, instead of letting them get to her, she acted like she didn't care. She adopted wearing revealing clothing to tell the villagers then she didn't care what they said about her, plus, it was super useful in a fight. The more the enemy focused on her killer body, the easier it was to kill them. Her clothing, however, was a double-edged sword because some idiots, like the one she just smacked, took it as an invitation to do what they wished. The drunken idiot, for example, she had been minding her own business and the guy stumbles over, grabs a handful full of her ass and starts whispering in her ear. While that really pissed Anko off, what always happened next she hated the most. The people would look at them and they would blame her. They looked at her like it was her fault, like she wanted what the idiot men tried to do to her. When she saw those stares, she always thought how unfair it was. How she just wanted one person to call the villagers on their bull, and suddenly her wish had been granted in the form of a 5-year-old that knew how to curse. Many questions had raced through her mind as Naruto proclaimed himself the pariah of this village and how he wouldn't allow another one in his turf. Who was this kid? Why did he stand up for her? Who declared themselves a pariah? Upon further analyses, Anko recognized him as the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. She was faintly surprised. Of all the people that would stand up to her, she didn't expect it to be Naruto. She had seen the boy a couple of times and he always seemed as happy as can be, so she never approached him, even though she knew they were treated similarly. She didn't have a reason why she never did, she just never did. When everyone returned to what they had been doing before, Naruto walked up the purple-haired kunoichi. He felt proud of himself. He had stood up for someone. He found someone who knew what it was like to receive those stares, even though he wished he never did. Maybe now they could be friends. If those guys look at you like that again, tell me. I'll sort them out, Naruto said in a serious tone, doing his best to sound like Kakashi. The kunoichi was an adult, so he thought she would like him better if he sounded like one. Anko blinked once, then twice, before she threw her head back and roared laughter. Naruto stood there silently picking up his broken heart. Guess he should have known better. When Anko finally calmed down, which was minutes later, she wiped a tear that was gathering in her eye. Wow. I haven't laughed like that in a long time, she commented before she grinned down at Naruto, who was starting to walk away. Want to get some dango, kid? Flashback end. It had been the blossoming of a beautiful sibling relationship between the two. After the event, Anko decided to start teaching Naruto everything she knew about stealth and become Naruto's third tutor. After Anko set Naruto down, who was grinning like a loon, she asked, "So what brings ya here, Naru-chan?" She asked with a grin. She absolutely adored her new baby brother. Anko doted the boy every chance she had. Naruto grinned up at his big sister. Anko had taken first place in his favorite, tying with Kakashi and knocking Gigi down to second. He still loved Gigi of course, but he only saw him twice the past 8 months, but he saw Anko and Kakashi just about every day. I just got done with training with Guy Sensei and Kakashi ni said I trained enough for today, Naruto reported proudly. Anko grinned. Oh, so you came to train with Anko-chan? She asked in a deceivingly sweet tone. Naruto turned white as a sheet before taking a step back. Despite becoming a bit of a training nut, Anko's training sessions were extreme to a ridiculous degree. She surpassed Guy in extreme training sessions. If that didn't tell you anything, then nothing would. Anko trained Naruto's stealth, infiltration and sabotaging abilities. She trained them in a number of different ways, but her favorite was telling Naruto to hide somewhere in the village and she would seek him out. Except when she found him, she would send her snakes after the poor boy. So Naruto's ability to stay hidden was rapidly improving. Another favorite of hers was to order Naruto to break into somewhere, mostly dango shops so she could get some, and have him sabotage the place, because they cut her off until she paid her tab. He would fill wherever he went with traps, non-lethal of course, and pranks. When she went to the bakeries or stores and if they hadn't been messed with enough that they cancelled her tabs, she would chase Naruto around with her snakes. Another way she trained his infiltration by having him sneak into places that he wasn't supposed to be. It could be anywhere from sneaking into the Hokage's office and planting a whoopee cushion or him sneaking into the woman's bathhouse and stealing panties. Oddly enough, Naruto had more trouble breaking into the bathhouse than he did the Hokage's office. If he didn't perform these pranks or crimes in a timely manner, she would chase him with her snakes. The training also sharpened another skill if Naruto was caught, the skill to lie. Anko had to say that Naruto was a natural at it, even if he didn't like it. When he had been caught in the woman's bathhouse, he acted like a lost child looking for his mother. Instead of murdering the male, like they would do to any other regardless of their age, the women cooed over Naruto. Naruto didn't even know how dangerous a situation he got himself out of, at least he wouldn't for a few more years. Naruto took another step back as he began to sweat nervously. While he loved Anko-ne, her training was something he could do without. I don't think so, Ne-chan. I think I'm good with stealth right now, Naruto protested weakly. He was too nervous to lie smoothly. Anko raised an eyebrow. Good with stealth. If I remember correctly, you were caught the last time you broke into the bakery, she said in a thoughtful tone. She remembered vividly because she had been craving dango, more than usual. However, it hadn't been Naruto's fault he had been caught. The owner hired genin to guard the bakery. Naruto got past them no problem, but he had been caught by the jonin. Anko was proud too because when he was caught he didn't sell her out. That would have been a pain to deal with. Naruto gulped audibly, but I haven't been caught a bunch of times, he defended. Anko lowered her eyebrow and raised her other, like when? Naruto panicked. The thought of having to train his stealth getting to him. I stole from the library before and didn't get caught. He blurted. Technically it was the truth because Kakashi had been the one that caught him and he still had the books. Anko gasped in fake surprise. You stole from the library? She said with a grin in her voice. She knew about the library incident due to Kakashi, but she felt like teasing Naruto. While Naruto was very astute for a child his age, he wasn't a match for Anko's ability to deceive. Naruto grinned as he relaxed. It seems that his achievement had appeased Anko for the time being. Yeah. I stole a bunch of books. He proclaimed proudly as he crossed his arms over his little chest. It took all of Anko's willpower not to at the sight. You fiend, she accused suddenly, jabbing a finger in the child's face, causing him to jump in surprise. I should call the police. She exclaimed loudly. She went to go walk out the door but was stopped by Naruto throwing himself at her and gripped her leg. Don't Anko-ne. I don't wanna go to jail. He exclaimed as he looked up at his big sister, activating his secret jutsu. Secret art. Puppy dog eyes. Anko smiled broadly before she picked Naruto up and squeezed him in her bosom. Ah, she cooed, like I could ever send your cute little butt to jail. She exclaimed as she squeezed. Ibiki watched all of this with a raised eyebrow and a smirk. He was happy for his colleague. He could see how lonely Anko was behind her brave face. You do realize that he's manipulating you, right? The scared man asked as he sipped his coffee. Anko nodded as she continued to hold Naruto's face in her chest. I sure do. I'm so proud I could just smother the brat with love, she sang happily. Naruto was years too young to try to pull the wool over her eyes. Naruto tenses up. He had been caught. Time for Plan D. Naruto began to struggle, as if he was trying to get out of Anko's grasp, but when Anko's grip remained tight, he began to relax his body. Slowly his attempts to flee died until he was completely motionless, he didn't even breath. This was Plan D, play dead. However, instead of believing that she had actually smothered Naruto, Anko turned to Ibiki. Would you look at that? She cooed. Naru-chan just faked his first death. How cute is that? Ibiki just sweat dropped. Hiruzen Sarutobi sighed in annoyance as he stared at the paperwork building on his desk. There seemed to endless amounts of the blasted pieces of paper. He swore for every piece he finished, 10 more would replace it. However, perhaps it was to be expected given the village hidden in the leaves' current condition. They were terrifyingly weak right now. The Kyuubi attack had wiped out nearly a third of their forces. That was when they had just started recovering from the Third Shinobi War. So they were barely hovering over the halfway line on the population of their shinobi forces. Not only did they lose half their forces, but they lost the fourth Hokage and his wife as well. So they lost an SS-ranked shinobi and a war hero, but Kushina had been the Anbu commander and an S-ranked shinobi herself. Then, when things couldn't have looked dire, he discovers that his student Orochimaru is experimenting on children. Kidnapping men, women and children from their homes for his terrible experiments. Hiruzen didn't have the heart to kill his beloved student. He had been like a son to him for so many years that he had just let the monster walk out of the village with a number of his pawns. He regretted not splitting the snake's head open now, but the past was the past. Jiraiya-kun was outside of the village maintaining his spy network. It would be unlikely that his student would be able to return anytime soon due to the village's precarious position. There were simply too many threats that they needed to know about for Jiraiya to return. His other student, Tsunade, had all but abandoned the village. After losing her lover in the Third Shinobi War, Tsunade had left the village claiming that she would never return. Hiruzen let her use her title as a Sannin to travel around the world so he wouldn't have two students that were missing nins. So not only was Konoha only at half strength, but they had lost a Hokage, several big names that gave their village much protection and revenue, and another big name was indisposed for several years. It was honestly a wonder why none of the larger villages, or even a smaller village, attempted to invade. He figured it was because they still had their title as strongest village and they were allied with Suna. However, Hiruzen knew that wouldn't protect them forever. Sooner rather than later, someone was going to peek behind the curtain and see that Konoha wasn't as tough as it let on. That's why he needed Naruto to become a shinobi quickly. While he despised the thought of turning a boy he thought as his own grandson into a war deterrent, he had no choice. He was a Kage first and a grandfather second. He had failed that duty when he let his traitorous student live, but he wouldn't fail a second time. Even as it broke his heart to do so, he needed Naruto to fulfill his duty as a Jinchuriki and become powerful enough to protect the village. That wasn't saying that he was going to turn the lovable boy into a mindless tool like Danzo wanted. No. He needed Naruto to become a powerful enough shinobi that other villages would think twice before attacking. Ah, that reminds me, Hiruzen thought as he dug in one of his drawers and pulled out a scroll. It was a report from Kakashi about Naruto's progress. Hiruzen had to say that either Kakashi, Guy and Anko were incredible teachers or Naruto was just one hell of a student. The boy has made amazing progress in the past 8 months. The boy seemed to have inherited the best from both of his parents. He inherited his father's intelligence, polite demeanor, and talent. He also inherited much from his mother as well. He got his confidence and never give up attitude from her. While Naruto's personality was more like his father's, Naruto had flashes of his mother's personality at times. He seemed to have especially inherited her fiery rage when angered, but lucky for the village of Konoha, he also had his father's long-fused temper and forgiving nature. Hiruzen smiled lightly as he envisioned Naruto's future, a future where his hat rested on Naruto's head. Naruto walked through the forest as he hummed to himself. Turns out that Anko was too busy to train Naruto at that moment and let him off the hook for that day. He knew that when Anko was busy, she was torturing people. That thought made him kinda queasy. He understood that his Nei-chan did a very important duty to protect the village, but he didn't like it. He didn't like that his Nei-chan had to hurt people in order to protect the village. He understood that the ninjas wouldn't give the secrets up willingly, but he didn't like the fact that they were tortured. They were just trying to protect their homes and their friends, and Konoha was hurting them. So, in this case, Konoha were the bad guys. He didn't like that at all. Naruto shook the thoughts from his head and continued his humming. He didn't want to think about those depressing things. No, Naruto wanted to think about happy things, like how in the past 8 months, his life took a major turn for the better. He had a bunch more friends now. He had Anko and Kakashi and Guy Sensei. He was running out of fingers on his hand to count all of his friends on. Naruto smiled happily as he thought of his new family, completely lost in his thoughts that he didn't even notice that he wasn't alone in a clearing of a forest. Naruto was snapped out of his thoughts as he heard the whizzing sound of a kunai. He looked over and leaned back far enough that he fell on his butt to dodge the incoming piece of metal that would have hit him in the neck. Naruto blinked in surprise as he heard the sound of clanging metal and looked over. When he did, he saw a single teenager standing on top of a rock, which surprised him because he thought people were fighting. Suddenly a tick mark formed on Naruto's head. What in the heck was this guy thinking? Didn't he look where he threw his kunai? He could have died. You jerk! Naruto yelled, surprising the teen greatly. You almost killed me. He accused as he pointed at him. Naruto noted that his would-be murderer was wearing a high-collared shirt with a red and white fan on the back. An Uchiha, Naruto deduced. He was familiar with the clan because most of the shinobi that didn't like him were from the Uchiha clan. They never outright abused him, but they never seriously pursued the ones that did or tried to. Naruto tensed as the teen turned around. Naruto saw that his Sharingan wasn't activated and he had lines that started at his eye and ended near his nose. Naruto didn't know if it was a birthmark or what, but it made him look older than 13. Itachi Uchiha blinked in surprise as he saw that he was no longer alone in his training spot and mentally cursed. He hadn't even noticed Naruto's presence. How was he supposed to be Anbu when he hadn't even noticed a child? Itachi didn't respond to Naruto's outrage verbally but pointed behind him. With a confused scowl, Naruto looked behind him and the expression dropped when he noticed that there was a giant target behind him. Oh, he muttered, sending Itachi an apologetic glance. Itachi smiled lightly, showing Naruto that he forgave him for yelling. What are you doing here? He asked in a stoic but kind tone. While Itachi did enjoy the presence of children, he was awkward around them. Naruto was slightly suspicious of the Uchiha, while Itachi hadn't done anything to deserve it. Becoming defensive around a Uchiha was second nature to Naruto. I just finished my training and wanted to take a walk, he said, keeping his voice as even as he could. He had been schooled by Kakashi that he needed to be calm and collected before, during and after a fight. That way his opponent couldn't use his emotions against him. Itachi's eyebrow raised lightly. Training, he repeated in an even tone, but there was a question in the word. Naruto nodded. Yeah, I'm going to become a ninja at the end of the year, he explained. While Naruto didn't know about the Hokage and Kakashi's agreement, it was a goal Naruto decided for himself. Kakashi Ni had been a genin at 5 and he would take the exam before his 6th birthday, which was 3 months away. Despite Itachi's collected nature, he clenched his jaw, though it was hidden by his high collar. This was the part of the shinobi world that he loathed. How could they make children fight? To murder and steal. However, Itachi quickly schooled his emotions. That's very impressive for someone your age, he complimented in a pleasant tone. Naruto allowed himself to smile lightly. Thanks. I've been training really hard for like a year now, he said casually. His training from Nei-chan told him to act at ease, it would put his opponent off guard. Again, Itachi felt anger but he did not show it. I see, he said somewhat awkwardly, not knowing what to say. Would you like to spar then? He asked. He knew Kakashi had been training Naruto for a while now. Kakashi would often brag about his little brother's progress and how he was a genius of epic proportions. He was curious as to what Kakashi and Guy had taught Naruto. Naruto's eyes widened. He hadn't expected that, but he couldn't say he didn't want to. He wanted to know how he would stack up against a genin. After all, the teenager was 9 so wasn't likely anything higher. Naruto grinned in honest eagerness. Sounds fun. He said as Itachi jumped down from his rock in the walk to the other side of the clearing. Itachi took out a kunai. When this hits the ground, that means start, he said before he tossed the kunai high in the air. 5. Naruto adjusted his footing. 4. Itachi got into the interceptor fist stance. 3. Naruto swallowed as his hand neared his weapon's pouch. 2. Itachi took a calming breath. 1. The kunai hit the ground and both boys began. Naruto reached into his weapon's pouch and threw half a dozen shuriken at his opponent. He was testing the waters like Kakashi told him to. Itachi didn't even blink as he pulled out a kunai and deflected the incoming shuriken before he turned it around and threw it at Naruto. Naruto dodged this kunai before he sprinted at the Uchiha. The teenager and the child engaged in a taijutsu match. Itachi played defensively, trying to get an idea of Naruto's level. That left the offensive for Naruto, but because of the height difference, he had to jump to attack at the teen's face and torso. Naruto threw a punch but it was caught by Itachi. Thinking fast, Naruto threw a roundhouse kick but that was blocked by Itachi throwing up his arm. Naruto kicked off of Itachi and jumped backwards, thinking that Itachi was good. Naruto skid backwards and reached into his weapon pouch and once again threw shuriken at the Uchiha, but this time he quickly flew through the hand signs and thought, wind release, great breakthrough. Naruto was taught not to yell out his technique. It didn't make it any stronger and it told his opponent how to counterattack. A large wall of wind blasted from Naruto's palm when he thrust it towards Itachi. The wind from Naruto's jutsu not only sped up his shuriken considerably but it also had a large area of damage. Again, Itachi's face gave no emotion as he quickly kawarimi'd with a log and was teleported into the safety of the treetops. Despite his calm look, he was rather impressed with Naruto. He knew that he couldn't have preformed a C-ranked jutsu like that when he was 5 or be clever enough to combine his ninja tools with it. As Naruto looked around for Itachi, the Uchiha shunshined behind the boy, intending to place a kunai at his throat to end the match, but the moment he appeared Naruto's sixth sense kicked in and he turned around. To Itachi's surprise, albeit a small measure of surprise, he saw a scroll in one of Naruto's hands and with a poof of smoke, a tanto appeared in his other. The boy swung with the tanto as he turned, causing Itachi to jump back. Itachi rose an eyebrow when he saw that Naruto wasn't pursuing him. It only took him a moment to figure out why. He only has a defensive style, Itachi concluded. Kakashi wouldn't teach Naruto an offensive style right off the bat, he would first teach Naruto how to defend before he taught him to attack. Itachi drew another kunai and charged Naruto. He wanted to see what type of style his senpai had taught Naruto. As Itachi charged, Naruto got in his stance and instead of jumping to the side, he deflected the incoming stab. Then he turned on the balls of his heels and did a rapid spin and attempted to slice Itachi in half with the momentum he built up. However, Itachi saw this and quickly dropped his arm and did a handspring over Naruto's blade and away from the 5-year-old boy. Itachi grinned lightly with approval. Naruto was good, great for his age, but he was certainly at genin level. While Itachi didn't like violence, he did appreciate a strong enemy, and one day, Naruto was going to be a force to be reckoned with. Very good. While your stance has a few holes in it, you're very talented with a blade, Itachi complimented. Naruto grinned. He was enjoying the spar and was starting to like Itachi. He didn't seem to be like the rest of his clan. You haven't seen nothing yet, he proclaimed as he stuck his sword in the ground and began flying through hand signs, wind release, wind hammer. Naruto thought before he slammed the bottom of his fist into his palm. Itachi, having recognized the hand signs, dove out of the way before air suddenly condensed over his head and slammed to the ground, creating a crater. Wind wasn't known as the most versatile element for nothing. As Itachi rolled back up, he saw that Naruto was running at him again, tanto in hand. Naruto seemed to have become overconfident in his abilities as he made a couple of wild slashes at Itachi, all of which the teen dodged easily before Itachi caught Naruto's wrist and tossed him to the side. Naruto rolled while silently apologizing to Kakashi for he was about to break his rule. As Naruto stood on his feet, his scroll already in hand before he activated the seal, and his free hand was filled with kunai before he started throwing. Itachi narrowed his eyes in suspicion. Naruto had to have known that ninja tools wouldn't work on him. Then again, Naruto was, for all intents and purposes, a child, so maybe he was just being stubborn. Itachi began deflecting kunai with one of his own, Naruto's falling all around him. Itachi silently praised Naruto's accuracy. All of his groupings were tight and he didn't seem to have too much trouble aiming at a moving target. Naruto began to gradually slow his throwing. His arm was begging to tire and he was running out of ninja weapons to throw. When Naruto finally stopped, kunai surrounded Itachi, who looked slightly bored. "Are you done?" he asked, but his tone wasn't mocking. The boy seemed to have enough kunai to fill a store. However, Naruto grinned. "Not quite yet," he said before he yelled, "Get him." Without warning, the kunai surrounding Itachi suddenly morphed into Naruto's before they all leapt on Itachi, causing Itachi's eyes to widen in surprise. Shadow clones. But how did he? Itachi thought in surprise, but, like always, soon figured it out. He hanged his clones into ninja weapons, not just a normal hanged either, a solid henge. But how? I doubt he can make seal-less shadow clones, so how did he manage to make and henge so many clones? Itachi wondered. Then Itachi realized that he couldn't see Naruto's hands when he was rolling away. During that brief window, Naruto took out his scroll, created, hanged and sealed the clones in it. If Itachi hadn't been impressed before, then he certainly was now. He never would have suspected Naruto to know shadow clones nor be cunning enough to think of such a clever strategy. From what he saw, Naruto was most certainly at genin level in terms of abilities, but he was possibly a low chunin threat considering how clever the boy was. However, that didn't mean Naruto had won this spar of theirs. Itachi cowerimied with the real Naruto. He was vulnerable since he had let his guard down, and now he was the one looking at him as clones dog-piled on their creator. With a rather large poof of smoke, the clones disappeared and exposed a disgruntled-looking Naruto. He thought he had won. He had Itachi pinned down and everything. Naruto sighed sadly. "I guess I'm not strong enough to take the exam yet," he muttered unhappily. Itachi chuckled softly. "Perhaps," he said in a kind tone. He didn't want Naruto to get a big head because he had done well. "What will you do?" he asked, trying to get an idea of what kind of child Naruto was and what type of shinobi he would be. While he had heard a fair amount from Kakashi, he wanted to see Naruto's personality with his own eyes. Naruto brushed himself off before he shot a huge grin at Itachi. "I'm going to train like 100 times harder." If I can't, then I'll train 1,000 times harder. He vowed as he gave Itachi a thumbs up. Itachi smiled at that. Turns out what Kakashi Senpai said was true. Naruto didn't know how to give up or get discouraged. I was surprised that you knew wind jutsu. Is that your affinity? Itachi asked and got a nod from Naruto. I have a wind and a small lighting affinity, but I don't know any lighting jutsu yet. Kakashi ni said I should focus on my stronger affinity before I learn any lighting jutsu. He hadn't started elemental manipulation, and wouldn't for several years. Kakashi needed to know what kind of jutsu Naruto was best off learning. But I know a fire jutsu. It's only meant to start fires, but I think it's cool, Naruto explained further. Itachi nodded. All children were obsessed with learning a fire jutsu. Itachi paused for a moment and debated teaching Naruto the fire release, great fireball technique. While Naruto didn't have a fire affinity, the jutsu would work very well with his wind affinity. The only concerns he would have were if Naruto had enough chakra and if he was responsible enough not to abuse the jutsu. However, those weren't a problem. Naruto had used over a dozen shadow clones and Kakashi had already taught Naruto 2 C-rank jutsu, the same rank as the great fireball technique. He also knew Kakashi wouldn't have a problem with it. He knew about his deal with the Hokage, so he needed all the help he could get, even if Naruto was already at Genin level. If you want, I can teach you an even cooler fire jutsu, Itachi offered, getting wide eyes from Naruto. Naruto was completely taken off guard, the offer taking him by surprise. Just about every Uchiha he had ever met were really arrogant and mean, but Itachi was completely different. A smile consumed Naruto's face. That'd be awesome. Thank you, Uchiha Sensei, he exclaimed. Itachi smiled again. The boy's smile was infectious. My name's Uchiha Itachi, he introduced himself. After Naruto did the same, Itachi showed Naruto the hand signs for his family's signature jutsu. Naruto memorized the hand signs quickly, and after a few practice runs he was ready for his first attempt. Fire release. Great fireball technique, Naruto recited in his mind before he took a deep breath and expelled it. The results weren't astounding. The fireball was little bigger than a basketball and Naruto ended up choking on the smoke. Itachi chuckled as Naruto hacked up a lung. That was good for your first try. He couldn't respond because he was too busy coughing, but when he stopped, which was several minutes later, he was cut off by a new voice entering the field. Ni-san, Sasuke asked in confusion as he entered the clearing. He was very confused and slightly jealous. Who was the blonde boy and why was he training with his brother? Itachi always said he was too young to be a ninja, but he was teaching a boy his age. That was totally unfair. Not only that, Sasuke always complained that he didn't get spend enough time with Itachi, but his big brother just poked him in the forehead and said some other time. Yet, he was spending his time with some random boy. While Sasuke was jealous and a little angry, Sasuke trusted his brother. He was sure there was some reason why Itachi was spending time with the mostly blonde boy instead of him. Sasuke walked into the clearing and held out a hand to Naruto, a grown-up's greeting. I'm Sasuke, he said in eager tone. I'm Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto greeted as he shook Sasuke's hand. What are you doing with my brother? Sasuke asked in a curious tone. We were sparring, then he taught me a cool jutsu, Naruto exclaimed, and Sasuke's eyes narrowed in jealously as he shot his brother a dirty look. I had nearly hurt Naruto while I was training, Itachi quickly explained. Naruto here wants to be a ninja, so we spared and I taught him a jutsu as an apology. Sasuke's eyes widened back up and a happy grin replaced the dirty look. He was right. There was no way his older brother would lie to him like that. Cool. I want to be a ninja too, Sasuke said to Naruto, thinking that they could be friends since they had that in common. Itachi watched the two eagerly talk about Shinobi. Sasuke was greatly impressed when he found out that Naruto was already training, and the three began to walk. Sasuke and Naruto talked the entire way back to the Uchiha compound. They talked about a number of things. what kind of ninja they wanted to be, what jutsu they thought was the coolest, and what ninja was the strongest of all time. Naruto and Sasuke were already fast friends by the time they reached the compound. Sasuke asked if Naruto wanted to come inside, but the blonde politely refused. While Sasuke and Itachi were nice, the rest of the Uchiha clan wasn't. If Naruto hadn't refused, then Itachi would have found a reason for him not to. Since the Kyuubi attack, the Uchiha clan had been becoming more and more isolated and treated like suspects. If Naruto came over, then it could look like an attempt to gain the Kyuubi under their control. Sasuke deflated, but a happy smile was planted on his face. Okay, but can we hang out sometime? He asked. He didn't have many friends and wanted to make a bunch. A smile consumed Naruto's face as he nodded. Yeah. I'll have to ask Kakashi ni, but I think I can tomorrow, he offered and got a nod from Sasuke. Naruto waved goodbye after they discussed where they would meet up, and he grinned to himself to the point his face hurt. He finally couldn't count his friends on one hand. Naruto fell onto the ground and laid in the grass. He and Kakashi had just finished his training session for the day, which had lasted the whole day. A full 24-hour fight against the two. It was an extreme version of capture the flag. Both of them had bases in a red or blue flag at the center, and the goal, as you could guess, was to take the enemy's flag and bring it back to your base. Kakashi, so Naruto would get the fullest extent of the training, limited himself in the high genin to mid-chunin area. That way the exercises wouldn't end within a few hours. However, much to Naruto's displeasure, that was all he held back. He used every other dirty trick he had up his sleeve. He hadn't pulled any punches either, because, despite his healing ability, was sure he was going to be sore stiff for the next week. Naruto wasn't the only one that was going to be feeling the effects of the spar. Training Ground 7 looked like a war zone. Craters were scattered around, sections of the forest were reduced to charcoal, other trees had been uprooted and splayed about, the river turned into a pond due to a rather large wind hammer. It would take more than a few D-ranked missions for the training ground to return to its former glory. Kakashi had won the game in the end. Naruto could be only so clever to a shinobi that's been a ninja for 13 years of his 18-year lifespan. Naruto had put up a good fight, better than most genin would do, but it hadn't been enough. Kakashi leaned over the mostly blonde child with an eye smile, blocking Naruto's view of the sky. You seem really worn out, Kakashi commented before he took a seat next to Naruto. Naruto didn't reply with anything other than a grunt, causing Kakashi to chuckle. The masked ninja gave Naruto a lazy look over, noting the boy's torn and wrecked clothing, making a mental note to buy him more soon, and another that Naruto needed a haircut. It was starting to get a bit shaggy. Kakashi chuckled to himself, thinking that he's become something akin to a father instead of an older brother. Hey, Kakashi ni, Naruto said in a hesitant tone, am I ready to take the genin exam? Kakashi looked over in lazy curiosity. This was sudden. While Naruto expressed that he wanted to become a ninja soon, Kakashi didn't think that Naruto was already thinking about becoming a genin. They still had a few months before Naruto had to become a genin, and while Kakashi did hint about Naruto taking the test soon, he never told him when he would be taking the exam. Kakashi hummed loudly as if he was thinking deeply. In truth, he wasn't. Naruto was going to pass the exam without any trouble, but Naruto didn't need to know how advanced he was for his age. It had been a problem with him as well. When Kakashi became a genin at 5, people bathed him in praise and he became arrogant as he grew older. He was hoping to avoid the same thing with Naruto because it took the deaths of his friends to snap Kakashi out of that arrogance. Naruto eagerly awaited his older brother's answer. He thought he was ready. He had been doing pretty well against Itachi, who Naruto still didn't know was officially a Chunin and unofficially Anbu, so he thought he was nearing genin level. He and Itachi sparred a few more times in the past month. Itachi had become Naruto's measuring stick. Itachi was Naruto's baseline of how strong you had to become a genin. During those spars, He had managed to land a grand total of one unclean hit on the team, but judging from Kakashi and Guy's reactions when he told them, that was pretty good. Because of their reactions, Naruto placed himself at just good enough to become a genin. At least in the physical aspects. Due to Naruto's strict training in the day and his secret training sessions at night, Naruto had fallen behind in the academic field. He could answer about half of the questions when Kakashi gave him a practice test, but with the higher year questions he didn't have the foggiest clue what they were talking about. What was chakra theory? How was he supposed to know how far Timothy threw a kunai judging by the height of a tree and the position of the sun? Why did he have to know what was in a solidar pill? Who cared about this crap? When Naruto scored a 42% on the practice test, he had been incredibly disappointed in himself, even though his senseis reassured him that he had done fine. Naruto had been so disappointed in himself that he broke Kakashi's rule again and used his clones to read about the material for the higher year students. He wasn't making much progress, however, since he only used 5 clones. A lot of the book's words were too big or an explanation was too complicated for Naruto to understand, but Naruto didn't give up. He looked up the big words and puzzled out the complicated explanations, and when he took another practice test, he scored a 53%. His senseis had been surprised by the jump in his score and were more than a little suspicious, but they let it slide. Kakashi had been a little disappointed that Naruto had broken his promise, but he was proud that Naruto was using his resources to improve, even if there was a small risk. Kakashi gave Naruto an eye smile. Yeah, I think you're ready to take the exam, he admitted. Naruto would be taking it regardless in a couple of months, so it didn't matter if he knew that he was ready. Naruto grinned broadly and looked validated. He knew it. He knew he was ready. Kakashi rose an eyebrow, noticing Naruto's expression. You don't seem too surprised. Is that why you've trained so much harder lately? Kakashi asked in a lazy tone. Naruto hesitated before nodding. Yeah, he admitted, his past exhaustion forgotten due to the knowledge. Kakashi rose an eyebrow and prompted Naruto to continue. His curiosity was intensifying. Why was Naruto suddenly training so much harder for? He briefly wondered if Naruto knew about his deal with the Hokage, but dismissed the idea. Only a few knew about the deal, and all that did wouldn't let it slip out around Naruto. Naruto fidgeted, debating if he wanted to tell Kakashi his goal. Not because Naruto thought he would laugh at him, but because Naruto was kinda embarrassed. While Naruto openly idolized Kakashi, it was awkward telling someone that you wanted to follow in their footsteps. Naruto steeled himself. Because I want to be like you. Naruto blurted in a half shout. At first Kakashi gave no reaction, but slowly he raised his hand and patted Naruto on the head. You shouldn't, was all he said as he softly rubbed Naruto's soft hair. His words were flat, but you could hear the long, tired sigh in his voice. Naruto drew his eyes together in confusion. He didn't know what kind of reaction he had been expecting from his Nissan, but he certainly wasn't expecting that. What? Naruto managed to say. He tried to look up to meet Kakashi's eye, but the mon's head kept his head down. Kakashi kept Naruto's head down so the boy wouldn't see the self-loathing anger in his eye. He was the last person that should be a role model, the last person Naruto should try to be like. He had failed so many people. Obito died to save him, his best friend, though he hadn't known it at the time. Because Kakashi had worshipped the rules and placed them above his friends' lives, Obito died. Perhaps if Obito had gotten some sense into his head earlier, or maybe if Kakashi had been a little stronger, he wouldn't have his best friend's eye in his skull. What was worse, he failed to keep his promise, the promise that Obito had asked him to make on his deathbed. He failed to protect Rin. No, he had killed Rin. The girl that Obito had been in love with for only God knows how long. He failed Obito in so many ways that night. He couldn't stop the Kiri ninja from kidnapping her. He couldn't stop them from sealing the Sanbi into her. He couldn't stop her from jumping in front of his Chidori and killing her with it. He had killed his best friend's love. He failed Sensei and Kushina Nichan. She wouldn't let him call her anything else, in so many ways. It was only in the past year had he stopped failing them, but he was helping Naruto enter the shinobi world when he should be crying for toys and playing with friends in the park. How could he count entering their son into a world of death and despair at the age of 5 not failing them? Don't get Kakashi wrong, he loved training Naruto. He loved helping Naruto along his path to be Hokage. He loved the fact that Naruto saw him as his older brother and wanted to be just like him. So, while he hadn't failed them completely, his good was just balancing out the bad. Naruto knocked Kakashi's hand away, confusion in his eyes. What did you mean I shouldn't try to be like you? You're awesome, Naruto yelled. He was confused. Why wouldn't Kakashi want him to be like him? Kakashi sighed as he looked away. Naruto. I've done a lot of bad things and failed a lot of people, he said as he looked into the distance, examining Naruto's man-made pond. Naruto fell silent at that. He wasn't surprised, well maybe by Kakashi failing people, but Naruto knew Kakashi had done at least a few bad things on his way to be Jonin. There was simply no way that he hadn't. However, he didn't let that knowledge change what he thought of Kakashi, just like he didn't let Anko's job change his opinion of her. His adoptive siblings were the best, nothing was going to change that. So, why does that mean I can't be like you? I've trained really hard and so I could take the exam soon. Naruto said stubbornly as resolve burned in his eyes. Kakashi's eye narrowed. Being a shinobi for so long, he could hear Naruto's unspoken words as well as his motivations. You want to take the exam before you turn 6, he stated and got a curt nod from Naruto. No, it won't happen, Kakashi said in his parent tone. It had gotten considerably better in the past year. Naruto's face fell. What? He said in a confused and upset tone. Why couldn't he take the exam? Kakashi just said that he was ready, so why couldn't he take it? Naruto, you're a kid, Kakashi started as he ran a hand through his gravity-defying hair, trying to think how to put what he had to say into words. You've been training at an age when you should be playing, you've been practicing jutsu when you should be playing with toys. Don't get me wrong, I'm proud of you for that, but Naruto, you have to understand that everything changes after you get your headband. You won't be considered a child by anyone, you'll be a solider. You'll be expected to lie, cheat, steal and kill for Konoha, and if you fail the consequences might be death rather than a few bruises. I want you to stay a kid for as long as possible. You can take the exam after you turn 6 but not a day before then, Kakashi finished, thinking that it didn't make a whole lot of sense that he was stopping Naruto from becoming a genin at 5 but okaying it at 6. However, that was how his deal with the Hokage worked. Naruto had to take the exam a month after his 6th birthday, so about 3 months from now. As Kakashi had said so many times before, he wanted Naruto to be a child until the last possible second. Kakashi could see that.